Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, my name is Tori and today I'm going to share with you guys some books that I've recently finished and then one of my current reads. So far I've been a little disappointed by the things that I've been recently reading. One of them I thought was good, but it definitely didn't have the impact on me in the beginning that it did towards the end. And then one, the big one, the tome, I'm sure you already saw it in the thumbnail, that just, honestly, I don't even really want to talk about To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, but we'll get to it. But yeah, I have 3 books to share with you, so let's get into the video. So let's start with my current reads first. I'll leave the big one, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, to the end of the video. You can skip ahead if you'd like. So the first book I'm reading is The Blade Itself, and this is the first book in the First Law trilogy by Abercrombie. I'm buddy reading this with Rose from Rose K Reads, so I will leave a link to Rose's channel in the description box below for you to go check out, go subscribe. So I'm a little over 100 pages in. I'm on page 109, and so far I just feel like I'm kind of along for the ride. I'm not hating this book, but I'm not loving it by any means. There's obviously a lot of deep character work I think already at play, and I just want to see how that's gonna continue on throughout the rest of the story. But I just kind of feel like this little bystander, just kind of watching these characters do their thing, and I have no idea what's going on so far. So the synopsis of this book is already pretty vague. It's just a description of the 4 main characters that we're kind of rotating throughout the story, and really that's pretty much what we've gotten so far. So in our first perspective, we're following Glotka, who's a torturer, and his perspective starts off with him trying to get information from somebody, but you can already tell that his tragic backstory of survival is starting to come out a little bit just in that first chapter that he has. And so that kind of ends with Glotka being assigned to go find somebody else and extract information from them, but he has no idea why. And then in our next perspective, this is the one that I actually am drawn to the most because I have the most questions about so far, and that's Logan Ninefingers. So his perspective just kicks off the whole book, and immediately we know that he has fled from something really horrific, and you don't really get the sense of what happened. There's just some kind of mention of creatures that attacked, and he just really lost everything. So Logan's past just really early on is shrouded in a lot of mystery and honestly some confusion, because you're like, well, what's happening? So we're following Logan as he's been traveling and trying to get away from the place that he escaped. So he finally has come to a new destination, and that's really where I left off with him. And then we have a perspective that I just don't care about at all. We're following this captain, and I've been in his perspective I think twice now, and there is absolutely nothing that is really interesting me about this character so far. So I'm gonna stick with him and just see where it goes. But then our final perspective is of a magi named Bayez, and so far I haven't been in Bayez's perspective. I've just seen how he has interacted with a certain character, but I don't think he's had a perspective of his own yet so far. But I think somehow Bayez is gonna tie in all of these characters and their own personal journeys together. But like I mentioned, there is some strong character work happening in here already that I'm excited to see continue. But yeah, so far I'm kind of on the fence about this. It's not really, capturing my attention the way that I thought it would before going into it, but we'll see what happens. So now let's get into my recent reads. There's only 2 of them, don't get that excited, but the first of them is Trouble of the Saints, and this is by Alaya Dawn Johnson, and I'm looking forward to talking about this one because quite honestly, I don't think I understood this book. This book has such a just ambiguous nature, I think, surrounding the plot as a whole, that makes it kind of difficult to understand, and even more difficult, I think, to talk about. So in my previous current reads video, I said that we were following one main character, but I wasn't far enough into the book at the time. And now I realize that that's not true. We're following 3 different main characters, and the 3 sections of the book are told in their different perspectives. But our first one is Phyllis, and Phyllis is this really famous assassin. She works for this crime boss, assassin, lord, whatever you want to call him, and she's known as his knife. And she has like another title that I'm forgetting, but she's really known as his knife because she can just go out and get the job done and kill people on his behalf. But Phyllis has really been wanting to leave that behind and make something different of herself. So then in our other perspective, we're following this character named Dev, who also has ties to, his name is Victor, the crime lord that Phyllis works for. Dev also has ties to Victor, and we also learn that Dev was Phyllis's former lover. So he has his own storyline going on in his section. And then in our final perspective, we have this character named Tamara, who was a dancer at one of the clubs in the city. So there is this fantastical element in the story called the hands. I don't even really know how to explain this, because to be such a central focus of the story, The hands is the thing that still confuses me the most. I'm not even sure how it really works. Essentially, people of color, at first I thought it was only black people, but it's actually people of color because Dev is, if I remember, I think he's of Indian descent. So it's people of color have this ability where they can do different things with their hands, or the hands provide them with the ability to do different things. So for example, Phyllis, is this making any sense? Am I explaining this correctly? But essentially with Phyllis, her ability with the hands allows her to basically be an assassin. It allows her to go out and wield these knives and kill people and that sort of thing. And then Dev has his own ability with the hands that he can do, and Tamara doesn't have the ability. And so basically we're following these three different main characters as they try to navigate this kind of seedy, noir-like 1940s New York with these abilities, but also as they try to, you know, reconcile who they are now with the people that they were, like working for this crime lord Victor. I don't really think that made a lick of sense, but that is essentially what I gathered from this book. Overall, I did enjoy this, but I think one of the biggest issues that I had with the book while reading it, and definitely upon finishing it, I'm just like, I still have no clue what I was supposed to get from that, is the mystery and the ambiguity surrounding this concept of hands, this hands ability. And Phyllis is really interesting because as a black woman, she is white passing. So even working for this crime lord, this crime boss, he's so goofy. He's like, I've never known a white woman to be able to use the hands before. And I'm like, Victor, I think we can put it together. Her ability to kind of maneuver in the crime world as white passing and then, you know, be a black woman with this ability, I think was something that I wanted to see explored a little bit more in the story. But overall, like I mentioned, I did enjoy this. I think there are just some great characters in here. I really enjoyed the whole vibe, the whole atmosphere of New York City in that time period. I think just it was captured so well in this. But I definitely still have a lot of questions about just the ability of the hands and what that means and what it means to different characters. So I think if you're curious, I would recommend this, but yeah, just be aware of that a lot of the questions that you have while reading probably won't be answered by the time you're finished. And then finally, the last book that I read was To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. Where do we even begin with this tome of a novel? So I picked up To Sleep in a Sea of Stars for this previous round of Tome Topple, but I did not finish it for Tome Topple. My God, I made my way through this book so slowly. And quite honestly, by the middle of it, I was just like, the Lord is testing me. I wanted to put this book down so badly, but it got to a point where I really felt like I was in way too far, way too deep for me to put the book down. So I just went ahead and finished it. So To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is Christopher Paolini's first science fiction novel, first epic adult science fiction novel, and it is epic. It's almost 900 pages. This is an epic sci-fi story, and it's also a first contact story. So in To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, we're following our main character, Kira Navarez, for the entirety of the novel. And the book starts with Kira on this uncolonized planet with the rest of her crewmates, and Kira is a xenobiologist. And so the book begins with the crew on their last night on this planet. And Kira, we find out, is romantically involved with one of her team members, and she's really dreading the separation that's gonna happen when, you know, her along with the rest of the crew leaves the next day. And so before they can leave, Kira's superior assigns her one more assignment before they all take off, and that is to go investigate this drone that went down at a different site. Kira goes to investigate, and she discovers that the site where the drone went down is actually this site for ancient relics. So Kira gets a little bit too close to this relic, and the entity within it begins to bond with her body. And that is really what sets the rest of the story in motion. And as the story starts unfolding, this bond that Kira has with this being just begins to really incite fear in a lot of the, you know, the important people throughout the galaxy. And eventually it begins to lead to threats of war. That's really the foundation of the story in a nutshell. Now, this book is too long. This book is about, I would even say this book is about 200 pages too long, and that's just me being generous. And even to be that long, it's like I said, it's almost 900 pages. And to be that long, I expect the characters to be a little bit more interesting. Kira, she carries the entire book, and she's just not a very dynamic character. She's almost like a caricature, like a cardboard cutout. She's like so many sci-fi female tropey characters kind of pulled into one person, and it's just so not interesting to read about. And we do have this really large cast of characters. We have the crew of the Wallfish, this ship that Kira eventually becomes a part of, and after a while even some of those characters begin to blur together. And honestly, the most memorable of them is the ship's AI, and I forgot its name. I think Grigorovich or something. I have so many gripes about this book. The next thing that I didn't enjoy about this book is the writing and the pacing. I thought the first half of this book was so much stronger than the second half, and the pacing really is just uneven throughout the entire story. I will say though, when we actually are learning more about just the history of this ancient species, when we're learning more about the bond that Kira has with the one that's attached to her, when we're getting into like the science of that and getting into talks of war and the politics of it, and I think that is just so interesting, and I love that aspect of the book. I thought that was so strong. But when we get to the duller moments of the book, it really hits you hard. It is really noticeable, especially because I don't think the characters are strong enough to sustain the parts of the book that are boring. And just like, forget the pacing of the story for a minute, just even the writing style of it in a lot of areas feels kind of juvenile. Some of the things that the crew members say to each other just feels like what? It feels a little cliche, just kind of silly in some places, and I started to fall off with the writing a lot actually in the second half. Ultimately, I think it just led to a really mediocre reading experience. I think if this book is already on your shelf, if you're already interested in picking it up, I say go for it, just to, you know, just to see what you think of it and just experience it for yourself. But I don't think it's one that I would personally recommend. Even as a first contact story, there are just better ones out there. So that's it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Let me know down in the comments which books you've read recently, what books you're currently reading right now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.